I'd like to start, please, just with some of the forensic building blocks underpinning your evidence today and the issue of the provision of material to the inquiry. In your statement, you set out how you rarely use text to communicate with colleagues. Your phone, you said, doesn't retain, and nor do you have access to text messages at all relating to the period of the crisis. And in addition, you said, although on occasion you use WhatsApp to communicate around meetings and logistics and so on, you generally were only party to WhatsApp groups that were set up to deal with individual circumstances, such as arrangements for calls, meetings, and so on and so forth. Is that broadly correct?
Yes, that is all broadly correct.
You don't now have access to any of the WhatsApps that you did send during the time of the crisis, do you?
No, I don't. I've changed my phone multiple times over the past few years, and as that has happened, the messages have not come across. As you said, I'm not a prolific user of WhatsApp in the first instance, primarily communication with my private office, and obviously anything that was of significance through those conversations or exchanges will have been recorded officially by my civil servants, as one would expect.
Evidence has been given to the inquiry to the effect that Mr. Johnson announced the institution of this inquiry in May 2021. And around that time, officials discussed the need for ministers and others to retain WhatsApps. It was a matter of debate, in fact, in WhatsApp communications between officials themselves. Around that time, April and May 2021, did nobody say to you, Chancellor, it's important that you do retain your WhatsApps, or we need to put into place measures for them to be backed up in case they become relevant to an inquiry?
No, I don't recall either of those conversations that you referred to between officials, but you might have been referring to officials in number 10 rather than the Treasury. And yes, and I don't recall anyone in my office making that recommendation or observation to me at the time.
Do you happen to recall, it's probably quite a long shot, but do you recall changing phones around that time as it happened?
Not around that time, as I said. I have changed my phone multiple times in the years since then, and as I said previously, every time that's happened, the messages wouldn't have come across. But as I said, I'm not a prolific user of WhatsApp, and with the private office, again, that would have all been recorded formally on the record, or indeed where I've had exchanges with other individuals. Some of those have been part of the evidence that's formed the inquiry's deliberations.
They have indeed, and I should make plain that we've got some of your messages from the other interlocutors to the communications. Now, turning to the role of Chancellor of the Exchequer, and it is, of course, because you were Chancellor of the Exchequer that your evidence today is of the greatest importance. You describe how, in your statement, how there was obviously, throughout the currency of the entire crisis, a clash between public health epidemiological considerations and economic and fiscal issues, both by way of the economic considerations which had to be taken into account by the government, and also the vast economic and societal damage that would be done by decisions such as lockdowns. In that debate, which raged throughout the pandemic, what was the general position of the Chancellor of the Exchequer? What position generally did you and Her Majesty's Treasury take?
Well, I don't think I ever referred to it as a clash. I think I saw my role as Chancellor of the Exchequer as making sure that the Prime Minister had the best possible advice, information, analysis relating to the economic impact or consequences of some of the decisions that he was having to make. Obviously, the Chancellor of the Exchequer's role is to be responsible for the country's economic and fiscal policy and the financial services sector. So that was my primary responsibility in the role. And then as it pertained to the pandemic, my jobs were not just to design and implement economic interventions like the furlough scheme or support for public services and businesses, but also, as I said, to provide analysis and advice to the Prime Minister as he made his decisions. And more broadly, just touching on what you said at the beginning, Mr. Keith, as a senior cabinet minister, one of the consistent arguments or points that I made from the beginning throughout was just making sure that we collectively in the Prime Minister considered the totality of the impacts of the decisions that we were making. It wasn't, as I didn't ever describe it as a clash just between public health and economics. I think that's to think about it in far too narrow a way. As many people have alluded to, and I did at the time, there were a range of impacts, many of them socioeconomic, the impact on children's education, on mental health, on the issue in the criminal justice system, as well as the pure economic impact. And it was important that policymakers consider the totality of those, and that was a consistent point throughout. But obviously, my particular responsibility was the economy and fiscal policy.